So Linda Fogg has joined me on the program. Thank you very much, Linda, for coming along. Linda is the director of the Tiny Habits Academy. She's coached 25,000 people or more personally in their free 5-day program that is all about adopting tiny habits to change your life. And she's trained and certified over 2,500 people in the Tiny Habits Coach certification program. But when I was talking to you earlier, Linda, you said the thing that always impresses people the most is that you're the mother of 8 kids.
So, I know.
With that said, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Michael. I am so glad to be here with you. And yeah, being the mom of 8 kids, people think I'm crazy. And I'm probably, as a result of having so many children, I am crazy at this point. I love kids, obviously, but it's given me a really good opportunity to study human behavior, not just out in the real world, but in the context of the household. And so I guess you can say that I have my own lab, own in-home laboratory, human behavior and habits.
Could you explain your system?
Yeah, our behaviors that we have are learned behaviors. And oftentimes they're learned out of the need to survive or the need to feel better. Habits, whether they're good habits or bad habits, are formed in the exact same way. And by that concept, we can overcome habits that don't serve us very well or habits that we feel like we need to change pretty easily by using the Tiny Habits method. And so I'll go into the details of that. But before I do, let's really lay a good foundation for understanding how human behavior works. The Tiny Habits method and the Fogg behavior model were designed by Dr. B.J. Fogg from Stanford University. He happens to be my younger brother. I have learned from him so many skills and tools that have helped me navigate some really difficult and challenging situations in my life. But to really understand human behavior, there's a model that BJ has designed, and it's called the Fogg behavior model. And what this model tells us is that behaviors happen when motivation, ability, and a prompt come together at the same time. Now let's unpack that for a minute. Most people, and I work a lot in the field of health and wellness and healthy behaviors, and even some of my colleagues think that the behaviors that they're trying to get their clients to do are just amping up the motivation. Or if they don't do a behavior, it's like, oh, they just weren't motivated enough. That's actually wrong. That's a myth. That's a fallacy. And it's a trap that we can get caught in ourselves if we feel like, oh, I'm just not motivated. The reality is when you look at the Fogg behavior model, and in the way that we define this in actually a formula is B, the behavior, happens, and we define that by an equal sign, when motivation, M, ability, A, and a prompt, P, so we call it BMAP, come together at the same time. So what's most important here is realizing that every single behavior that occurs, whether it's our own behavior or somebody else's behavior, originates with a prompt, which is a call to action. Like the doorbell rings, that's the call to action to answer the door. Now, say that we're having a conversation, a very engaging conversation, and maybe my doorbell rings. Well, that's the prompt to answer the door, but I don't have the ability right now to answer the door. And not only that, I'm more motivated to sit here and visit with you than I am to say, hey, hang on, Mike, I'll be right back. And so when you're looking at human behavior, you start recognizing that those 3 elements go into every single human behavior. The converse is also true. If you want to stop a behavior, then you need to remove one of those elements. So, either remove the prompt or it makes that behavior harder for somebody to do, basically removing the ability or removing the motivation. We all get caught in the trap of old school thinking where we think it's all about motivation, and hopefully understanding this model will free you up to realize, no, it's not your fault. It's not about motivation. It really is about that call to action occurring when you have the ability to do something that you want to do.
So what if I don't understand why I don't do something? So my habit is to be defensive and closed off and protect myself. How do I get from that state where do I attack that problem, let's say, using your system? Or is that too much of a jump?
Well, now let's go into the Tiny Habits method. And this is one of the important things that make the Tiny Habits method different than other methods. If you amp up motivation, it's not a sustainable behavior. It's only short term, and it typically is not successful. And so maxim number 1 in the Tiny Habits method and in human behavior design is help people do what they already want to do. So in your case, if you say, yeah, I want to learn how to respond differently as opposed to being closed off, then that qualifies for, yeah, this is something that you want to do. Maxim number 2 is help people feel successful. And we'll get into more detail about that a little bit later. But let's just sort of role play here for a minute. What is the behavior or habit that you want to design for?
So I want to engage in a conversation that might be happening in my group, but I don't engage because I feel like, well, people could reject me if I say something wrong. So it's easier to stay quiet.
Yes. And so in a situation like that, instead of focusing on breaking that habit or saying, no, that's a bad habit, with my clients, what we do is we start thinking about what kind of habits and behaviors do you want to do instead in that situation. In the tiny habits method, there's 3 distinct parts of that method. There's the anchor moment that acts as the prompt. There's the tiny behavior that's really easy to do, and it's so tiny it does not take willpower or effort. And then there's the instant celebration, which is the attachment of a positive emotion to reinforce that new behavior. We call it a recipe because it's very fluid. You can change parts of it to really help you achieve what you want to achieve. And in this particular situation, you're wanting to be more involved in the conversation, and you want to have the courage to speak up and to be seen and heard. And so by saying, when I'm in a group discussion and somebody brings up a point that is new to me, say, hey, John, tell me more about that. And that can be your tiny habit. But the real key is then silently congratulate yourself, say, good job. I just inserted myself into the discussion in a meaningful way, because it's meaningful when somebody else is asked about their experiences.
My next question, and I know I'm jumping the gun on you, is
that's okay.
Have you seen people's lives transform from adopting tiny habit recipes?
Oh, yes. Every single day, we see people who have made massive changes in a little tiny way. We liken the tiny habits method to like planting a little tiny seed. And even if you want to adopt big changes or facilitate big changes in your life, it starts in a little tiny way that you feel good about and positive about. This might surprise you. In all of our research around habit formation, one of the biggest impacts of practicing tiny habits, and the most important impact, is that people gain confidence. They realize they now have a skill that they can implement in any area of their lives that will help them facilitate the changes that they want to make, whether it's, cleaning your room, whether it's being kinder, whether it's being more grateful, or whether it's overcoming some inhibitions that we have, or basically breaking those bad habits that are not serving us. But it's all done by creating positive habits. This is a scientifically proven method, and we do have evidence. There's even been some research done by Stanford University on the impact of tiny habits and really helping people change in ways that they want to change very quickly and easily. It does not take 21 days to create a habit. That is a myth. Repetition does not create habits. That is a myth. What creates habits is the positive emotion that you attach to that behavior. And you need to be really specific about what the habit is that you're wanting to create. Identifying the prompt, which is the anchor moment, identifying what the tiny behavior is, and then reinforcing it with a positive emotion. Even as simple as saying, good job, or way to go, or woohoo, whatever it is that makes you feel good. The very first edition of the book had a belly band, which is a cover on the book, that said, this book will change your life. Well, for me, the tiny habits method saved my life. It all started with the passing of my 20-year-old son to a very sudden and accidental Oxycontin overdose. It was devastating for us and very traumatic. Shortly after that, I had a serious horse accident that should have killed me. I only ended up in the hospital for about a week, and then I was able to eventually fully recover from that after some time. Broke all of my ribs, and I had a very serious concussion where I couldn't drive for about 3 to 6 months because I would get dizzy. In the midst of all that, I have a daughter who has bipolar illness, and she was in and out of the mental hospital herself, which is very, very traumatic for her and traumatic for us. So I felt like at that point in my life, I was just getting beat up, one punch after another after another. Well, that continued on, and we used to have a home building business in Las Vegas. The housing crisis took us out of the game. It completely wiped us out. We lost our home, we lost our business. And in the midst of all of that as well, and this, of course, I'm covering about 8 years of trauma. In the midst of all of that, my husband was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's at the age of 58. And we still had children at home, children in college, and he no longer could even function. Well, as I was trying to navigate through a lot of these challenges, one day I had a phone call with BJ, and I was really in a dark place. It was like, I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to function. I was even in the mindset that when I'd go ride my bike, it's like, I don't care if I get hit. I really don't care if I get hit. That was sort of where I was at, not a good place. I was talking to BJ one day and he said, "Hey, Linda, why don't you try this tiny habit and see if it helps you?" And because he's a pretty smart guy, I thought, okay, why not? And the tiny habit goes like this. After my feet hit the floor in the morning, I will say it's going to be a great day and celebrate. Well, now how is that going to make a difference? That's so tiny. But I started practicing that habit. And in about 3 to 4 days, what I noticed is I had a mindset shift. We now call this the Maui habit because it's always a great day in Maui. But what happened to me by practicing that habit is I started my day off with a win because I would celebrate that. So I would start off my day by releasing positive endorphins and dopamine, positive emotions. And not only that, by saying it's going to be a great day, I was putting out into the world that I expected to be a great day. And not only that, that I was going to make it a great day. Instead of letting my day control me, I was able to make the conscious decision to control my day. And so my mindset shifted from that of a victim to a victor. Now, you might think that's a small shift, but that's a huge shift when it comes to really navigating your day in a more positive mindset. How we think and how we feel does directly dictate how our day goes and our relationships with others. And so practicing that tiny habit recipe really gave me the power back and the ability to make the decision to make every day a great day. Now, you and I both know that not every day is a great day. And there are some days that are challenging days, but you can still revise this recipe to make it a positive recipe. Now, I'm very literal. And so the days that I knew were going to be hard days, I just could not, in all honesty, get up and say it's going to be a great day because I would just be lying to myself. And so this recipe I was able to revise, for example, as my husband was declining with his Alzheimer's illness, or I'd have to take him to the neurologist. I knew those would be days where we would get difficult information. Those would be hard. And so what I would say when my feet hit the floor is, I'm going to make it a great day for Brent and celebrate that. And that would allow me to focus on making it the best day possible for him. Let me take that one step further. Unfortunately, my husband did pass away in July of 2020. That was the middle of the pandemic. It was really difficult. We were allowed to have a social distance viewing and funeral. Now, anybody would know that those would be difficult days. As we got up to those days of the viewing and the funeral, I knew I could not get up and say it was going to be a great day. Instead, what I decided to do is when my feet hit the floor in the morning, what I said is, I'm going to make it a great day for those that come to pay their respects to Brent. And so as people came through the receiving line to pay their respects to my husband, it allowed me with intention to acknowledge them and acknowledge the difference that they had made in my husband's life, as well as my life or my children's life. That made all the difference for me on those 2 days. Those days ended up being great days simply because I wasn't focused on my pain and my hurt. Instead, by stating that I was going to make it a great day for those that came to pay their respects to Brent and celebrating it, acknowledging, reinforcing, yes, I'm going to make this a great day for others. It ended up being a great day for my family, for me, as well as those that came to pay their respects.
It was hearing that story that made the world of a difference for me, because it's not a superficial thing you've heard about. You've used this for the worst traumas. You've used it for coming back into life after the loss of your son, and then applying it again as you get really bad news about your husband losing your business, then your husband's passing. And the tiny changes that you make to the recipe that you're using are absolutely fascinating in their impact, because they're so small. That's really why I wanted to have you on the show, because you've lived this. You're preaching it from the experience of, I know how powerful and impactful this is and that it really works. And you've been running the academy for how many years now?
10 years
25,000 people. Psychology is one of my strong interests. Did it in college. And familiar with B.F. Skinner and him saying you can't change your childhood or your genes. You can only change your environment. And this really, really grabs the environment and changes it and helps you achieve anything you want, because you've given other examples of completely different things, like how do I do weight loss with tiny habits? How do I do all these various different things? And it's just so remarkable how effective it is. Can you talk about the 5-day challenge that you have and why people should do that? And you also have a certification program. I found it interesting that you lead people to a certification program, but really that's a fantastic way to lock something in. If you want to know something well, learn it, study it. But if you really want to know it, teach it. So what would you do in the program? And I know these start every single Monday.
Yeah.
So it's like anybody listening to this show today can join your Tiny Habits 5-day challenge on Monday, and in a week, see how effective this system is.
Yeah. In fact, if you enroll before noon on Sunday night, we will get you started off on the following week. And we pair you with one of our coaches, either a coach in training or a currently licensed coach that will work with you during that week. And it's email based. It'll take about 20 minutes to get set up and then about 5 minutes a day to implement. And the transformations and the breakthroughs that people have in just that short period of time are remarkable. So anybody can sign up at tinyhabits.com/join, or to go to the tinyhabitsacademy.com on the homepage. You can join that too. It's free. So we run that every single week of the year. And it really is our way to help the world become familiar with how easy it is to create new habits, even really difficult habits. So that's a great opportunity for anybody to go through. The certification training program is an intensive 7-week program, but we only meet for 90 minutes for once a week. We teach it live on Zoom. It's very interactive in very small groups. And the reason we do the certification training is in the early days of the Tiny Habits method and the development of that, and this was back in 2012, BJ and I realized that this method will change lives. This method is very impactful. And we started thinking, how can we get this out into the world to really help people live happier, healthier lives? And at that point in time, it dawned on us, by training people that want to teach and help others, that's really going to be the biggest point of leverage for us to help the most people possible. And so we have 2 new cohorts that start every single month. If you enroll, I'm the instructor. I have an assistant director that helps me instruct. And you also get direct access to BJ once a week to ask questions. We have open office hours. It is really a robust training, whether you want to just really learn it yourself and teach your family and friends, or whether you want to apply it in a professional setting. You'll become an expert in the field of habit formation. And when I say expert, there's other people out in the world that have written books on habits. I'm not going to mention names, but by the time you're done with the certification training, you will know more about habit formation than they do.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that, so I won't say that about it either if you don't want to. First of all, your certification program is way underpriced. But,
Thank you.
I'm saying that I love the idea, though, of doing something, learning it for yourself and to help other people, because you're going to apply yourself much more. So if I can get something out of this and I can learn how to do it, and I can help somebody else, like my kids, for instance, through what I learn, then all the better for me. But at the same time, the program is sneakily going to help me change and fix all the things that I want to address in my own life. And I think it's fair to say that anybody who enters a program that is transformational, you typically go in for one reason, and you find out that the reason that you've joined and that you signed up for is not the big issue, but you discover the big issue because you're now in one of these programs and you can address that. And that's what becomes transformative about it.
Yes. Yeah.
You're with the experts that know how to help you see what's in your blind spot.
Well, and also in our Tiny Habits Certified Coach community, it's a community that's an ongoing community. So you have support, you have people that really are wanting to make a difference, not just in their own lives, but in the lives of those that they love and the lives of those in their community. And we attract the most amazing people. And it really is an uplifting community. What we're focusing on is helping everybody create the life that they want, achieve the dreams that they're trying to achieve. And this is the way to do it. A lot of other certification programs tell you what to do. The Tiny Habits method overlays really nicely in any kind of a program or whatever you're trying to do, because it's the how to do. It's the key that unlocks the door, that actually teaches you the systematic process that you can use to achieve whatever you want to achieve. And I know, Michael, with your audience, a lot of them have struggled with trauma. A lot of it comes from childhood. Some of it is current day trauma. A derivative of the Tiny Habits method is what we call the Pearl Habits method. And the reason we call it Pearl Habits is because it takes those irritants or those difficult situations and gives you a skill to rise above those challenges.
So tell me about the Pearl method.
I'll give you a couple of examples. I have a very old Sequoia. It's a car I love. I don't need to replace it, don't want to replace it. But 2 years ago, my catalytic converter was cut out of my Sequoia in the middle of the night and stolen. When your catalytic converter is gone, your car sounds like a Mack truck, or it sounds like a great big freight truck. It just rumbles and it's illegal to drive. Well, when I got out and got in my car and it sounded like that, I was really irritated. Took my car to the shop and it was like $2,500 to replace the one that was stolen from my car. Plus it took about 3 months to get that part in because in the middle of the pandemic, parts were very, very scarce. But I still needed to drive my car. And so every time that I got in my car and turned on my car and the big rumble would come up, it would make me jump. Instead of getting irritated, what I designed was a Pearl habit, which was after I turn on my car and hear my engine, I will tell myself, I'm glad they left the rest of the car and celebrate. I have had a complete car stolen. And so it was my way of turning that aggravation into gratitude, into positivity, as opposed to being aggravated. Because whoever stole my Cadillac converter, they don't know that I'm aggravated. That's not going to hurt them. It just hurts me. Another one of my Pearl habits is when I'm in a situation that I don't know how to navigate, that anxiety starts to come in, I will ask myself, I wonder what I will learn on this adventure. Now, adventures are fun and it's full of new discoveries. But by reframing that emotion and that feeling into a positive context of, I wonder what I'm going to learn on this adventure, it really helped me feel more at ease about going into an unknown situation and actually look for those lessons that I could learn that in turn I could help other people. And so a Pearl habit is taking any situation, a feeling, an emotion, maybe somebody's negative comment, and using that as a prompt, as an anchor moment to respond positively instead of react negatively. And so that's the application of the Pearl habits. And what we find is it really positively impacts mindset and really gives you back the power to show up as your best self as opposed to being compromised.
So it's really a tiny habit that helps you not get triggered.
Yeah, well, exactly. If you start identifying what triggers me or what sets me off and list those triggers down and then think ahead of time, pre-design, how do I want to respond when that trigger occurs? What's going to be a more positive response? How can I diffuse that trigger or diffuse that feeling? And then, determine and design what the behavior is. But of course, the really secret sauce to the tiny habits method is using your emotions to reinforce that habit or that behavior, pulling up those positive feelings, behaviors that we feel good about. That's what creates habits. That's what makes us want to repeat those. And so tapping into your positive emotions or some kind of celebration and attaching that emotion to that behavior is what's going to help that habit become automatic.
I love that because most of us, what we do is we get triggered and we go, I hate that. And then if it happens again, we go, I hate it again. What you're saying is take those, audit what triggers you as to best your ability, especially if you're going into a particular situation, say like you're going to do public speaking or something, and have it prepared in advance what you're going to do in response to the trigger. That's going to diffuse the trigger.
Exactly.
That's really good. Yeah.
Or help you reframe that situation to be a situation that is not as overwhelming or scary.
Yeah.
I am a big advocate of physically writing down your tiny habit recipes. And the way we teach our coaches to teach their clients, and even in our 5-day program, the format is after whatever that prompt is, I will, whatever that tiny behavior is, and then reinforcing it with a positive emotion. I oftentimes will have my clients write their tiny habit recipes on their bathroom mirror with a dry erase marker. Why? Because they can see it morning and night. They're able to read it. So it helps reinforce visually what their habit is, but also what it does is if they want to revise part of that habit, it's really easy just to wipe off that part in the bathroom mirror and put in the new anchor moment or the new tiny behavior. It doesn't matter if where you write it, but your hand-mind connection is very powerful. So physically writing down that tiny habit recipe will help you be more effective in implementing it.
I like it. I'm going to write on the mirror. When my wife triggers me, I will. And I'll say, Linda Fogg told me to put this on the mirror.
When my wife gets mad at me for writing on the mirror, I will smile at her and say, I love you, right?
Very good.
As you have 4 kids, I have 8. This is still a methodology that we can use with our personal relationships and our interaction with others, and particularly our children. Even adult children still do things that aggravate you. For example, my daughter that has bipolar tends to be really negative. I've worked really hard on creating habits of positivity and a positive mindset, especially so that I can show up in my work to help people and show up in my work to be prompted and inspired as to what will help them the best. And when I'm in negative mindset, I don't hear those promptings or that inspiration. So one of my tiny habits is when Amber says something negative about herself, I will give her a genuine compliment on something she's done in the last 24 hours. And then I'll usually say, good job, or yes, some way to celebrate that. But what that does, and this can be used in any kind of relationship, but what that does is it diffuses the negative energy and it changes the conversation to one that is validating of that individual and one that is positive.
I do like particularly to think of things in advance and have a recipe that works. So if you go through the training, though, you'll know how to have a recipe that works. Normally, my recipe is like overcome it. It's not filled in with anything meaningful. So I like the idea that you can break it down and also that you can address it in advance. Is there anything else that you want to add?
Yes, there is, Michael. Through my years of coaching and the many, many thousands of people that I've worked with, what I have learned is guilt serves no purpose. Guilt keeps us stuck. So free yourself from feeling guilty. Celebrate the little tiny moves forward that you're making, even something simple as making your bed. I don't care if you've made your bed for 50 years. When you make your bed, stand back and say, good job, that looks great. And don't feel guilty about what you don't do. I think God wants us to show up as our best selves every single day, but we also need to realize our best today doesn't really compare to our best yesterday, because today is a whole new ball game, whole new situation and scenarios. So don't get stuck on guilt. Don't get stuck on what you don't do or what you didn't do or what you feel like you should have done better. Focus on what you're doing well and celebrate everything that you do well to help you show up as your best self, and then in turn, allow you to help other people. Every day you have a new chance, and every day there's tiny victories that you can celebrate and acknowledge that you are moving forward in your life.
Thank you very much, Linda, for taking the time out of your day to come on and talk about this. I really love it. And I'm going to put the links up underneath and on the screen for people to sign up for the 5-day challenge. It's totally in alignment with what we've been doing on this show for years, addressing traumas, but addressing it in a very unique way that to me seems so doable and within everybody's reach. It helps you overcome traumas and get back the best part of yourself so you can live your life fully. And that's really what it's all about. So thanks for taking the time.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Any way that I can help your audience and your listeners, please hit me up. Let me know how else I can help, because this really is our purpose, is really giving people that freedom and the ability to live a happier, healthier life.